The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. 900 species followed its laws. 4 spiral arms of the galaxy answered to its authority. Every new civilization that discovered faster-than-light travel eventually joined the Council. There was no other choice. There had never been another choice. The process was always the same. A new species would be discovered. Diplomats would arrive with gifts and promises. The newcomers would sign the Covenant of Compliance, accept a council governor, and begin the long process of integration. It took centuries. It required patience, but it always worked. When humanity's first starship appeared in council-monitored space, the ancient protocols activated immediately. Sensors detected the crude vessel tumbling out of its faster-than-light jump, its hull scarred from the journey. The humans had clearly just discovered interstellar travel. They were primitive. They were alone. They were perfect candidates for integration. Ambassador Valeth of the Korani received the assignment with great honor. Her species had existed for 9 million years. They were beings of living crystal, ancient beyond measure, wise beyond comprehension. Valeth herself had guided over 300 first contact missions. She had never failed to bring a new species into the fold. She assembled a delegation of 17 species aboard the diplomatic station called Eternal Accord. Representatives from across the galaxy gathered to welcome humanity. There were the Morthani, towering insectoid warriors who served as the Council's military arm. There were the Sylvani, delicate plant beings who controlled the great trade routes. There were a dozen other species, each playing their part in the grand machinery of galactic civilization. The human delegation arrived in a small shuttle. There were only 6 of them, led by a woman named Director Chen Weilin. She was middle-aged by human standards, with sharp eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. She wore a simple uniform with no decorations. Her companions were equally plain. Valeth found this strange. Most new species sent their most impressive leaders dressed in their finest garments, desperate to make a good impression. The humans looked like they had come to fix a plumbing problem. The welcoming ceremony lasted 3 hours. Each species presented gifts and spoke words of friendship. The humans accepted everything politely, nodding and smiling. But their eyes kept wandering to the windows overlooking the stars. Finally, Valeth began her presentation. She explained the great honor being offered to humanity. Provisional membership in the Galactic Council. Access to the great library which contained the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Trade routes spanning the galaxy. Protection from predatory species, who might otherwise destroy them. All humanity had to do was sign the Covenant of Compliance. Director Chen raised her hand. "May we see this covenant?" Valeth was pleased by the question. It showed the humans were taking this seriously. She transmitted the document to their data devices. The covenant was 17,000 pages long. The humans spent the next 6 hours reading it. They asked questions constantly. What did cultural adjustment protocols mean? Who decided which traditions were acceptable and which needed to be modified? What happened during the 300-year integration period? Why did new species need a council governor? What authority did this governor have? What happened to species who refused to sign? Valeth answered each question with patience. The cultural adjustment protocols ensured that primitive practices were replaced with civilized ones. The governor would guide humanity through the difficult transition. The integration period allowed new species to gradually accept their place in the galactic order. As for species who refuse, there have been a few, Valeth admitted. They are no longer with us. Director Chen nodded slowly. She looked at her fellow humans. Something passed between them without words. "Thank you for the thorough explanation," she said, rising from her seat. "We decline." The translation systems flickered. Several delegates made sounds of confusion. The Morthani representative clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter, thinking this was a joke. Valeth's crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated bewilderment. "I do not believe you understand, Director. This is not a negotiation. This is how civilization works. Every species joins the council. There is no alternative." "Perhaps in your experience," Chen replied. "But we did not cross the void between stars to become a client state. We did not sacrifice 3 generations of scientists and engineers just to hand our future to strangers. We came here to be neighbors, to be partners, to be equals. You are not our equals, the Morthani representative growled. You are infants. You have had interstellar travel for less than a century. We have had it for millions of years, and you should have plenty of patience, Chen said. Give us a few million years. We will catch up. Valeth raised a crystalline appendage to calm the room. Director Chen, please be reasonable. Without council protection, your species is vulnerable. There are civilizations out there that would destroy you for resources, or enslave you for labor, or simply eliminate you because they find your existence inconvenient. The galaxy is dangerous. We are aware of danger, Chen said. We have faced it before. We will face it again. But we will face it as free people, not as servants. Covenant does not make you servants. It makes you citizens. Citizens who cannot govern themselves. Citizens whose culture must be adjusted. Citizens who need a foreign governor to make decisions for them. Chen shook her head. On Earth, we have a word for that arrangement. We fought many wars to end it. The chamber fell silent. The delegates looked at each other, uncertain how to proceed. This had never happened before. New species always signed. They had no choice. The galaxy was too vast, too dangerous, too complex for a young civilization to navigate alone. Director Chen gathered her delegation. We thank you for your hospitality. We thank you for your offer. But we must decline. If you wish to trade with us as equals, if you wish to share knowledge as partners, if you wish to build friendship as neighbors, we welcome that. But we will not sign away our future. She walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and looked back at Valeth. You said there were species who refused your covenant and are no longer with us. You meant that as a warning, but we heard it as a promise. Her eyes were hard. Whatever happened to them will not happen to us. The humans left the station within the hour. Their crude little shuttle disappeared into the darkness between stars. The council. Delegates remained in the chamber for a long time, struggling to understand what had just occurred. In 12,000 years of galactic civilization, no species had ever simply walked away. Valeth finally spoke. They will return. They must return. Isolation is impossible. When their resources run low and their people grow restless, they will come back and beg for the covenant. The other delegates agreed. Of course the humans would return. They had no choice. But somewhere deep in her ancient crystalline mind, Valeth felt something she had not experienced in millennia, doubt for 50 years. Humanity simply vanished. Council scouts tracked the human vessels as they retreated toward their home star system. The ships moved slowly at first, then faster, then impossibly far. And then the signals disappeared entirely. One moment the humans were there, the next moment they were gone. Valeth ordered a full investigation. Scout ships were sent to the region of space where humanity's homeworld was supposed to exist. They found nothing. The stars were there. The planets were there. But there was no sign of human civilization. No radio signals. No energy signatures. No evidence that intelligent life had ever existed in that corner of the galaxy. The scientists were baffled. It was impossible to hide an entire civilization. The energy required to power a technological society left traces that could be detected across light years. Yet humanity had somehow masked everything. Their whole stellar neighborhood had become a blank spot on galactic maps. Perhaps they destroyed themselves, suggested the Morthani representative at the next council session. Young species often do. They discover nuclear weapons or artificial intelligence and eliminate themselves before they can mature. Many delegates agreed with this theory. It was the simplest explanation. Humanity had been arrogant and foolish. They had rejected the Council's protection and paid the ultimate price. It was unfortunate, but it was also a useful lesson for other species, considering similar foolishness. Valeth was not convinced. Something about Director Chen's final words stayed with her. The human had not seemed foolish. She had seemed certain. She had seemed like someone who knew exactly what she was doing, but decades passed and there was no sign of humanity. The council gradually forgot about the strange species that had rejected their offer. There were other matters to attend to, new civilizations to integrate, trade disputes to resolve, the endless work of maintaining galactic order. Then the reports started coming from the outer reaches, eh? Merchant vessel from the Velthari Confederacy arrived at a council station carrying cargo that should not have existed. Medical devices that could regrow lost limbs in hours. Materials stronger than anything in the Great Library. Power cells that produced energy with impossible efficiency. When asked where they had obtained these wonders, the Velthari captain smiled nervously. Traders, he said. We met them at a station in the fringe systems. They called themselves human. More reports followed. Human trading vessels were appearing at stations throughout the outer reaches. They came and went like ghosts, offering technology that rivaled the elder races themselves. They did not ask for much in return. Basic resources, cultural artifacts, information about galactic politics. Sometimes they simply wanted to talk, to learn about other species and their ways. They never tried to sell to the council directly. The Morthani demanded an explanation. A warship was sent to intercept one of these human traders. The vessel was captured and brought to a council station for examination. The human crew was questioned thoroughly. We are just merchants, their captain explained calmly. He was a young man with dark skin and an easy smile. We trade with anyone who wants to trade with us. Where do you come from? The Morthani interrogator demanded. How did you develop this technology? How did you hide from our sensors? The human shrugged. Trade secrets. You understand? This technology violates council patents. These power cells use principles that the Great Library says are impossible. Maybe your library needs updating. The interrogation continued for days, but the humans revealed nothing useful. They were polite. They were cooperative. They answered every question about their cargo and their trade routes, but they would not explain where they came from or how their technology worked. Eventually, the council had to release them. They had broken no laws. They had harmed no one. Trading was not illegal, but the damage was already being done. The minor species of the galaxy spent millennia under council rule. They had accepted their place at the bottom of the hierarchy. They had waited centuries for probationary status to end. They had watched the elder races enjoy privileges that would never be extended to them. Now they had another option. The Sylvani trade masters noticed it first. Species that had always been reliable customers were buying less from council vendors. The advanced technology that the elder races had used to maintain their dominance was being undercut by human merchants offering better products at lower prices. The Karani observed that minor species were growing bolder in council debates. Representatives who had always been quiet and submissive were now asking difficult questions. Why did integration take 300 years? Why did probationary species need governors? Why were certain technologies restricted? The questions were not new, but the confidence behind them was Valeth requested a private audience with the High Council. The 7 elder races who truly ruled the galaxy gathered in a chamber that few beings ever saw. She presented her findings. The humans are not merely trading, she explained. They are redistributing power. Every piece of technology they sell to a minor species reduces that species' dependence on us. Every trade relationship they build is a relationship that does not include the council. Then we stop them, the Morthane elder growled. We send a fleet. We find their hidden world and force them to comply. We have been trying to find them for 50 years. We cannot attack what we cannot locate. Then we punish the species who trade with them. We revoke their privileges. We remind them who rules this galaxy. Bayless' crystalline form flickered with concern. If we do that, we may push them closer to the humans, not further away. These species are already questioning our authority. Punishment might confirm their doubts. The chamber fell silent as the elder races considered this problem. For 12,000 years, they had maintained control through a simple formula: advanced technology plus military power, plus bureaucratic complexity. No species could challenge them, because no species had access to the tools needed for a challenge. The humans had broken the formula. They were giving those tools away. What do the humans want? Asked the eldest of the Karani. A being so ancient that light passed through her crystalline body like water through a net. Valeth had been asking herself the same question for decades. The humans were not conquering territory. They were not building an empire. They were not even demanding loyalty from the species they traded with. I believe, she said slowly, that they are building an alternative, a different way of organizing galactic civilization, one that does not require the Council. That is impossible. The Council is civilization. We've always believed so. But the humans... She paused, searching for the right words. The humans appear to disagree. The meeting ended without resolution. The elder races could not agree on how to respond to a threat that did not look like a threat. The humans were not attacking anyone. They were simply ... existing. Differently, but Valeth understood what the others did not want to admit. The galaxy was changing. Slowly, quietly, without violence or conquest. Humanity was reshaping the foundations of galactic civilization, and the Council had no idea how to stop them. The breaking point came without warning. The Velthari Confederacy had been a loyal member of the Galactic Council for 600 years. They had signed the Covenant of Compliance. They had accepted their governor. They had waited patiently through their probationary period, trusting that full membership would eventually come. It never did. Every century, the Velthari petitioned for advancement. Every century, they were told to wait longer. Their culture still needed adjustment. Their technology still needed evaluation. Their leaders still needed guidance. The reasons changed, but the answer was always the same. Not yet. So when the Velthari ambassador stood before the Grand Senate and announced his species was leaving the Council, the chamber erupted in chaos. This is treason, the Morthani representative roared. You cannot simply leave. The Covenant binds you for eternity. The Covenant binds us to slavery, the Velthari ambassador replied. His voice was calm, but his 4 eyes burned with anger that had been building for centuries. 600 years we have waited. 600 years we have obeyed. And what has it brought us? We are still treated as children. We are still denied the rights that elder races take for granted. You are not ready for those rights. You must earn them. We have earned them 1,000 times over. You simply refuse to acknowledge it. The ambassador lifted a data tablet. The humans have offered us something you never would. Full partnership and something they call the Open Accord. No compliance protocols. No cultural adjustment. No governors. No waiting. Just mutual defense and free exchange between equals? The Senate descended into shouting. Delegates accused the Velthari of betrayal. The Velthari accused the Council of oppression. Security forces had to separate representatives who came close to physical violence. When order was finally restored, the Velthari ambassador delivered his final statement. We do not hate the Council. We do not wish you harm. But we will no longer pretend that a cage is a home, no matter how comfortable you make it. As of this moment, the Velthari Confederacy withdraws from Council jurisdiction. We will seek our future among those who treat us as what we are, a sovereign people with the right to determine our own destiny. He walked out of the chamber and never returned. Within a year, 47 other species had followed the Velthari, then 100, then 200. The trickle became a flood as civilizations realized they had options beyond the Council's rigid hierarchy. The defections followed a pattern. First, human traders would appear in a system, offering technology and trade. Then cultural exchange would begin, with humans sharing their history, their philosophy, strange ideas about equality and self-determination. Finally, representatives from the Open Accord would arrive with a formal invitation. The invitation was simple. Join us, and you will be free. No one will tell you how to live. No one will govern you without your consent. No one will decide which of your traditions are acceptable and which must be eliminated. For species who had spent centuries under Council control, it was an irresistible offer. Valeth watched the collapse with growing horror. Everything she had worked for over 300 years was crumbling. The galactic order that had maintained peace for 12,000 years was fracturing along lines no one had predicted. She requested a meeting with the humans. To her surprise, they agreed. The meeting took place on a dead moon at the edge of council space. Neutral ground. Valeth traveled alone, as did the human representative, a man named Marcus Okonkwo. He was older than Director Chen had been, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone who had seen much and was no longer surprised by anything. They sat across from each other in a small shelter, looking out at the stars. "Why?" Valeth asked. She had spent decades preparing for this conversation, but now that it was happening, she could not think of anything else to say. "Why are you doing this?" Okonkwo considered the question. "Doing what exactly?" "Destroying everything we built. Tearing apart a civilization that has maintained peace for 12,000 years. Has it maintained peace?" He raised an eyebrow. "Or has it maintained control? Those are not the same thing. Without control, there is chaos. Species wage war. Civilizations destroy each other. We have seen it happen countless times. So have we. On our own world, before we reached the stars," Okonkwo nodded slowly. "We had empires that lasted thousands of years. We had systems that maintained order through force and hierarchy. We had rulers who believed they were doing what was best for everyone beneath them. And what happened? They fell. Eventually, they always fell. Because systems built on control contain the seeds of their own destruction. The people at the bottom grow resentful. The people at the top grow arrogant. And one day, something breaks." Valeth's crystalline form pulsed with frustration. "The Council is not an empire. We do not conquer. We do not enslave. You call it integration. You call it guidance. You call it protection." Okonkwo met her eyes. "But when a species has no choice except to join you or be destroyed, what would you call that?" She had no answer. "We rejected your covenant because we recognized it," he continued. "We had seen it before, on Earth. Colonial powers offering protection to primitive peoples. Trade agreements that somehow always benefited one side more than the other. Cultural adjustment programs that erased everything that made a people who they were. We are not colonizers. No. Then why do probationary species need governors? Why do cultures need adjustment? Why has the same hierarchy existed for 12,000 years? With the same species always at the top and the same species always at the bottom?" The shelter fell silent. Outside, stars burned in the eternal darkness, indifferent to the conversation taking place beneath them. "You will tear the galaxy apart," Valeth said finally. "Without the Council, there will be chaos. Species will fight. Civilizations will destroy each other. Maybe, or maybe they will learn to cooperate without being forced to. Maybe they will build something better than what exists now." Okonkwo stood and walked to the window. "We do not know what will happen. No one does. But we believe that people deserve the chance to find out for themselves. And if they fail, then they fail. That is the price of freedom." He turned to face her. "But at least the failure will be theirs. At least they will have tried." Valeth returned to council space with a heavy heart. She delivered her report to the elder races, describing her conversation with the human representative. The response was immediate and overwhelming. If diplomacy had failed, force would succeed. The militant compact was authorized to bring the human problem to a permanent end. 300 warships, the largest fleet assembled in 5,000 years, launched toward the region of space where humanity was believed to exist. Valeth watched them go, knowing in her ancient heart that she was witnessing either the salvation of galactic civilization or its final mistake. She suspected it was the latter. The fleet never reached its destination. 300 warships carrying the combined military might of the Galactic Council jumped into human space expecting to find a primitive civilization cowering before their power. They found something very different. Admiral Kethrix of the Morthani commanded the expedition from the bridge of his flagship. The absolute authority. He was a veteran, of a dozen wars, a warrior who had crushed rebellions and conquered systems. He had expected this mission to be simple. Find the human homeworld. Demand surrender. Destroy them if they refused. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel into empty space. Sensors showed nothing unusual. Stars burned in their normal patterns. Planets orbited in their normal paths. There was no sign of the hidden civilization they had come to destroy. Then the humans appeared. They did not come from any direction the sensors were watching. They simply materialized, as if space itself had opened to release them. One moment the Council fleet was alone. The next moment it was surrounded by thousands of vessels that had not existed seconds before. The human ships were unlike anything in the Great Library. They were sleek and elegant, their hulls shimmering with energy patterns that Council scientists could not identify. They moved with perfect coordination. Flowing around the Council fleet like water around stones, Admiral Kethrix ordered his weapons to fire. Nothing happened. Every system on every ship in the fleet shut down simultaneously. Engines went silent. Weapons went cold. Even the lights flickered and died, leaving crews in darkness, lit only by emergency strips along the floors. For 3 terrible hours, the Council fleet drifted helplessly while human vessels circled like predators examining prey. Communications were dead. Sensors were dead. The warriors who had come to destroy humanity could only watch through windows as their enemies decided their fate. Then the systems came back online, not the weapons, not the engines. Just life support and communications. A message appeared on every screen in every ship, delivered in a calm female voice. This is Director Chen Weilin of the Human Collective. Your fleet has entered our space with hostile intent. Under normal circumstances, we would be justified in destroying you. We have chosen not to. Admiral Kethrix stared at the screen. The voice continued. Your crews will be collected and returned to Council space unharmed. Your ships will be dismantled. Your weapons will be recycled. Consider this a lesson in the costs of aggression against those who wish you no harm. The rescue took 3 days. Human vessels approached each Council ship, extended docking tubes, and escorted the crews to transport vessels. The process was efficient and gentle. Medical teams treated those who had been injured during the system failures. Food and water were provided to those who needed them. Not a single Council citizen was harmed when the last crew member had been evacuated. The human vessels did exactly what they had promised. The Council warships were taken apart piece by piece, their components sorted for recycling. 300 vessels representing 5,000 years of military development ceased to exist in less than a week. Admiral Kethrix was returned to Council space aboard a human transport. Before he departed, a young human officer handed him a data crystal. The director asked us to deliver this personally, the officer said. She said the Council would want to understand. The crystal contained a recorded message. Valeth gathered the elder races to view it together. Director Chen Weilin appeared on the screen. She had aged in the decades since their first meeting. Her hair was completely gray now, and her face carried the weight of years. But her eyes were still sharp, still certain. We rejected diplomacy 50 years ago because what you offered was not diplomacy, she began. It was submission dressed in pretty words. You called it protection, but you meant control. You called it integration, but you meant assimilation. You called it partnership, but you meant dominance. She paused, letting the words settle. We spent 50 years preparing for this moment. We knew you would eventually send your fleet. We knew you would try to force us to comply, and we wanted you to understand something important before that happened. The image shifted to show a star map. Points of light appeared across it, hundreds of them scattered through a region of space the Council had believed was empty. This is what we built while you ignored us. 200 star systems. 40 billion human beings. Technology that your great library says is impossible. We did this in a single generation, because we were free to try things your civilization abandoned millennia ago. Valeth watched with growing amazement. The scope of human achievement was staggering. They had terraformed barren worlds. They had built stations that harvested energy directly from stars. They had developed medicines that extended lifespans by centuries. We could have hidden forever, Chen continued. Your sensors will never find us unless we want to be found. But hiding was never our goal. We wanted to build something, a different way of organizing civilization. One based on choice rather than coercion. The star map expanded to show the species who had joined the open accord. Their territories were marked in blue, spreading through the galaxy like a growing web. The open accord is not an empire. We do not rule anyone. We do not demand compliance. We simply offer an alternative to your system. Any species that joins us keeps their sovereignty, their culture, their right to make their own decisions. We ask only 3 things: mutual defense against aggression, free exchange of knowledge, and respect for the rights of all sentient beings. Chen leaned forward, her eyes seeming to look directly at those watching. You will not destroy us. You cannot destroy us. But we do not want war. We never wanted war. We simply wanted to exist on our own terms. She spread her hands. Not to you, but to everyone in the galaxy who is watching this message. If you want to remain with the Council, remain. If you want to join the open accord, join. If you want to do both, or neither, that is your choice. We will not force anyone to do anything. The message ended with coordinates. The locations of human diplomatic stations, where any species could come to learn more. The elder races sat in stunned silence. Finally, the eldest Karani spoke. They could have destroyed our fleet. They could have destroyed our stations. They could have conquered half the galaxy before we knew what was happening. Yes. Valeth agreed, but they did not. No. The ancient being's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated deep thought. Why? If they have this power, why show such restraint? Valeth had been thinking about that question since the message ended. She remembered her conversation with Marcus Okonkwo on that dead moon. She remembered Director Chen walking away from the Covenant 50 years ago. Because they do not want to rule, she said slowly. They want to prove that ruling is not necessary. The implications of that statement hung in the air like smoke. If the humans were right, everything the Council had believed for 12,000 years was wrong. Order did not require hierarchy. Civilization did not require control. Peace did not require a power that enforced it. If the humans were right, the galaxy had been living a lie, and now everyone knew it. The Galactic Council did not collapse, but it transformed into something its founders would not have recognized. In the years following humanity's revelation, the rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for 12,000 years began to dissolve. Probationary periods were shortened from centuries to decades. Cultural adjustment protocols were abandoned entirely. Governors were recalled from species that no longer needed or wanted them. The elder races had no choice. With a genuine alternative available, they could no longer maintain control through the threat of isolation. Species that were unhappy with council treatment simply left and joined the open accord. Those that remained demanded better conditions. For the first time in recorded history, the council had to compete for loyalty. Some species stayed. They valued the stability and tradition that the council represented. They appreciated the great library, the established trade routes, the familiar bureaucracy that had organized their lives for generations. Change was frightening, and not everyone wanted to embrace it. Others left entirely, joining the open accord and building new relationships with humanity and the other species who had chosen freedom over security. They accepted the risks that came with self-determination. They made mistakes. Some of those mistakes were costly, but they learned from them, and they grew. Many species chose both paths. They maintained membership in the Council, while also participating in the open accord. They built bridges between two visions of galactic civilization, proving that cooperation did not require uniformity. The galaxy became something new, something that had never existed before. A place where different ways of organizing society could coexist and compete peacefully. Valeth watched these changes from her position on the Council. She had served for 300 years, guiding species into the fold, maintaining the order she believed was necessary for civilization to survive. Now she was watching that order transform into something she barely understood. She decided to make one final journey. The human colony world was called New Mombasa, named after a city on Earth that had been important to its founders. It orbited a yellow star not unlike humanity's original sun. From space, it looked like a blue and green jewel, clouds swirling across continents that had been barren rock. Just 50 years earlier, Valeth's shuttle landed at a small settlement near the equator. The buildings were simple but elegant, designed to blend with the landscape rather than dominate it. Children played in the streets, human and alien together. Several species had chosen to live among humanity, drawn by curiosity or friendship or the simple desire for something different. She found Marcus Okonkwo in a garden behind a modest home. He was very old now, his dark skin weathered by years under alien suns. He moved slowly as he tended rows of vegetables that had traveled with humanity from Earth. "Ambassador Valeth," he said, looking up with recognition. "I wondered if you would come. I had to see for myself." She looked around at the peaceful scene. "I spent 3 centuries studying your kind. I still do not understand you." Okonkwo laughed softly. "What is there to understand? You had the power to rule. After you stopped our fleet, you could have dictated terms to the entire galaxy. You could have built an empire larger than anything in history." She turned her crystalline form to face him directly. "Why did you not?" He was quiet for a moment, his hands working the soil around a plant with small purple fruits. "Do you know what we called empires on Earth?" "No, we called them mistakes." He straightened slowly, wincing at the effort. "We built many empires over our history. Some lasted centuries. Some lasted millennia. They all fell eventually. And when we studied why they fell, we discovered something interesting." "What?" "It was not their enemies that destroyed them. It was themselves. The act of ruling corrupts the ruler. The effort of maintaining control consumes resources that could be used for creation. The need to suppress dissent stifles the innovation that made the empire strong in the first place." He shook his head. "We did not come to space to repeat those mistakes." Valeth's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated deep thought. "But someone must lead. Someone must make decisions. Without authority, how do you prevent chaos?" "We don't prevent chaos. We manage it." Okonkwo wiped his hands on his clothing and gestured for her to follow him. They walked through the garden to a small hill overlooking the settlement. "Look at this place. 100 different decisions were made to build it. Where to put the buildings, how to organize the streets, what crops to grow. Who made those decisions? Your leaders? No, the people who lived here. They discussed, they debated, they argued. Sometimes they made mistakes, but the decisions were theirs, and so they owned the consequences." He smiled. "That is the secret, ambassador. People do not resent authority when they have chosen to accept it. They do not rebel against rules when they helped create them." It sounds inefficient. Oh, it is. Terribly inefficient. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. A human leader said that long ago. We have found it to be true. They stood in silence, watching the sun move across the sky. Below them, the settlement went about its daily life. Humans and aliens walked together, worked together, lived together. There were no guards. There were no walls. There was no visible authority maintaining order, and yet order existed. "You have changed everything," Valeth said finally. "The galaxy will never be the same." "Good." Okonkwo looked at her with eyes that had seen much and forgiven much. It was not working for most of the people in it. She stayed for several days, observing, asking questions, trying to understand this strange species that had appended everything she believed. She visited schools where children learned to think for themselves rather than memorize accepted truths. She attended meetings where citizens debated policy with passion but without violence. She saw conflicts resolved through compromise rather than authority. It was messy. It was chaotic. It was nothing like the orderly civilization she had spent her life maintaining. But it was alive in a way the council had never been. When she returned to council space, Valeth requested an audience with the remaining elder races. Many had withdrawn from active governance, unable to adapt to a galaxy that no longer accepted their natural authority. Those who remained were tired and uncertain. "I have seen the future," she told them. "It is not what we built. It is not what we wanted, but it may be better than what we had." "How can chaos be better than order?" demanded the Morthane elder, one of the few warriors who had not retreated into bitter isolation. "Because it is not chaos. It is complexity." Valeth's crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated revelation. "We thought civilization required control. The humans have shown that it only requires cooperation. We thought peace required a power to enforce it. They have shown that it only requires people who choose it. And what do we do now?" Valeth considered the question for a long moment. She thought of Director Chen, walking away from the Covenant with quiet certainty. She thought of Marcus Okonkwo, tending his garden on a world that should not exist. She thought of all the species who had chosen freedom over security and discovered they could have both. "We learn," she said. "We adapt. We become part of the new galaxy, instead of trying to preserve the old one." It was not the answer the elder races wanted, but it was the only answer that made sense. The galaxy continued to change. The council continued to transform. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, humanity continued to build the future they had chosen, not because they had conquered it, but because they had imagined it, then made it real, and that, Valeth finally understood, was what made them different. Not their technology, not their military power, not even their philosophy of freedom. It was their belief that the future was not something that happened to you, it was something you created. She returned to her duties, guiding the council through its painful transformation, helping species adjust to a galaxy where they had choices they had never known existed. It was difficult work. It was often frustrating. But for the first time in 300 years, she felt something she had forgotten was possible. Hope the galaxy was not ending. It was beginning again, and this time, everyone would have a voice in what it became.